Today, we're going to be continuing our talk on the different positions of the major scale. We'll dive a little bit into some more caged stuff, do a little recap on what we've already talked about. And next week will be position 5, which means we'll have covered all positions of the major scale, meaning that then we can start taking a much deeper dive into what we can do with all of this. With that being said, let's get started with it. Position 4 of the major scale is really nice because we are starting once again on a root note. That is going to be on your 10th fret of the A string. So that's G. The way that this pattern goes is we'll go 10th fret on the A string with our middle finger to the 12th fret of the A string with our pinky. Moving up to the D string, we have the 9th fret. We'll use our index finger for that. 10th fret of the D string with our middle finger. 12th fret of the D string with our pinky. Moving on to our G string, we have the 9th fret. Then we go to the 11th fret with our ring finger. 12th fret with the pinky. Then the B string, there's that little shift forward because of how the B string's tuned. So then we go 10th fret with our index finger. 12th fret with our ring. 13th fret with our pinky. High E string is the 10th fret to the 12th fret, once again with the ring finger. If you'd like to complete this and hit that third octave, pinky will be a whole step above that to the 14th fret, and then a half step to the 15th fret. So we should have in total that is position 4 of the major scale. If you wanted to work your way backwards, because there are some notes underneath that we are missing, you would go from that note there, the 10th fret G, we'd go a half step back. That's our 7th. And then using the pinky, 12th fret on the low E string, that's to the E. Then we'll go a whole step back to the 10th fret, another whole step, that's the 8th fret, a half step, fret of the low E string, and then a whole step back, A note, our 2nd, on the 5th fret of the low E string, and then finally winding up on the 3rd fret of our low E string, which is G. Now the interesting thing on that is there's only 2 notes on our A string, those 2 notes right there, meaning that the majority of this major scale we're playing on just the one string. That is a handy thing to know how to do because it shows you where all of your intervallic distances are. It's that whole, if that's my 1, I've got a half step. Really nice thing to know how to do pretty much with all of your scales. When you're learning to solo and play any sort of lead, it's a really good idea to, on every single string, find whatever scale that you're playing in and play it just on that one string. I know I've talked about that in the past, but it's a really handy way to identify those distances between the notes. And it's what a lot of slide players do. They will typically play a lot of their solos on one or maybe a couple strings. It kind of depends on the tuning that they have their guitar in. But it gives you that very vocal quality because you're not typically flying way down. You're making these small adjustments within the scale, which is very similar to what the human voice does. Obviously, sometimes they will jump really high up, but a good one that just drove by. So, other things to talk about. Position 4 is the A in our caged chords. That's where this shape is derived from. So let's do a quick recap on our caged chords while we're talking about this. We started in G for the key of this major scale that we're going to play. The reason I chose G is I'm pretty sure I can get through all 5 positions without having to change a key. It might be a little tougher once I get up into position 5. We'll talk about that here shortly as well. So G, caged, C-A-G-E-D. Those are our open position chords. C-A-G, those are the shapes that we're making, but in the key of G. So when we play a G chord, that's the G. That's easy enough. When we did position 1, that was the E shape, which once again, C-A-G-E-D, that is the order. So if I start on C-A-G, E would be the next one, and it is indeed And then D is the next one, and it is indeed, that was position 2. Once we got to position 3, it was C, because we start over. And now we're in position 4, so C, A, it's our A shape. And you can see how they are exactly like that. Looks like an E shape, right? Except my bar is taking the place of what the nut would be doing for me. When I got to the D shape, it does look like a D. Once again, the nut's doing me a favor and grabbing the root note there, right? Then the C shape looks like C. And then we have this one that looks like A, because it looks like A minus the bar. What you should really be taking away from Caged, and what I encourage you to take away from Caged, is learning what each note in those chords actually is. Not necessarily the note itself by name, but what the interval is. So if we were to take, we'll just take an open G chord. What is all of this? I'll even do just a regular G chord, not a rock G chord. So we have our root down there at the bottom. If, as you run through the scale, 1, 2, 3, that is a third. When we get to the open D string in that chord, 3, 4, 5 to D, and 3, 5. Then we have our open G string. Well, that's back to a 1 again. We have a B string, which is just another 3, and then our final note, another G at the top. So 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 1 is the chord components of this chord. And of course, as we know with major chords, it's just a sequence of 1s, 3s, and 5s. But that's super helpful, especially when we start talking about triads. We want to go into, well, let's add this note. Well, what note can I pull out in order to add that note? So 3s and 5s, right? We've got a smaller number here, but a 3s and 5s. And actually that's 2 1s, a 3, and a 5. 1s, 3s, and 5s. 1s, 3s, and 5s. So really handy. Once again, I will do a deeper dive into Caged, and we'll talk about all of that, especially how we can pull those triads out of it, and maybe even start talking about spread triads, or even some shell voicings that you can pull from that. Spread triad, which I think sounds really cool. It reminds me a lot of Eric Johnson, right? Spread triads, really interesting topic, which, will, like I said, we'll go over a lot of that whenever we start talking about Caged some more. The last thing I wanted to touch on here with this, in my last video, I had mentioned that the next 3 note per string pattern came from positions 3 and 4. When I went back and watched that, I said, oh, no, you dummy, it's 4 and 5 is where it comes from. So we'll talk about that one in the next video. I'll definitely bring that one to light. So with this one, of course, we have the A shape from our Caged system. The chord construction components of that, I've got a 1, that's my 10th fret of my A string. I've got a 5 there. I've got my root note again. That's on the 12th fret of the G string. The 3rd on the B string there, and then another 5 at the top there. What we can do with that, I'm not sure if I should touch on this too much right now, but we might as well. We can pull a few triads out of that. The main triad that a lot of us may know or may not know, if you don't, it's a really handy one. It's literally just taking that little bit of a bar there that you've got on the D string, the G string, and the B string, and that is the full triad. It is technically a second inversion triad because the 5th is on the bottom. If it was a first inversion triad, the 3rd would be on the bottom, and if it was just a root position triad, obviously the root would be on the bottom. Since the 5th is on the bottom of this one, it is a second inversion triad. There's one other triad that we can pull out of this position, and that is, this would be the root position triad, as a matter of fact. And it's where we take, instead of these 3 strings, the D, the G, and the B, we take the G string, the B string, and the high E string now, just those 3. And I have a root right there. I have the 3rd and the 5th at the top. So you could, in theory, with just triads, work your way through the diatonic chords of that scale. something else we'll definitely get into a little further. But if you were interested in what triads to pull out from, what to focus on, the main things that I really like from this particular shape, I really like that it leads into the 3-note per string. I also like that since it's sharing the same root note from position 3, it's really nice to have that arpeggio right there. Interesting. Clearly I'm not very warmed up here. There we go. Which also has a lot of those triads. Especially, I really like that one. That's just that C shape coming from our 3rd position. So that spot right there is a really handy spot, especially when you're playing lead, in this case major, or once you start diving into modes and those relationships. There's an awful lot going on here that's super close together, and it's pretty ergonomic to get to them. So I really like this spot a lot. Once again, the arpeggios that are here, the triads that are here, and the fact that they all share the same root note right there, and the fact that I can very easily go from that arpeggio into that 3-note per string sequence. So we'll dive deeper into the 3-note per string sequence next week. Last thing to touch on, some practice stuff that we can do. I would definitely recommend running through that caged pattern. I really like going from that C shape, getting used to that. And then, of course, utilizing our other scale practice exercises that we've done in the past, doing note groupings of 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. Note groupings of 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. All of those are really nice. You could do traveling in thirds, which this spot is a pretty easy spot to do that. 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, what is it, 3? That sort of idea, so on and so forth. That one's really cool because it shows you all the chords in the key of G, whether or not it's major or minor. I did a segment on that in a video past. I might do another one on that again, now that we're kind of getting caught up into the major scale. But let me know down in the comments if you want to see something like that. How to find all the chords in that key and what do I do with it once I've got them. Once again, any questions or comments, please leave them down below. I will leave a link to our newsletter that has a lot of helpful tips and tricks. If you like this kind of stuff, we send those out once a week. Pleasure as always. Ben here from Intermediate Guitar. I'll see you soon. Toodles, everybody.